The doctor didn't say it loud enough for my daughter to hear. She pulled me out of the examination room, down the hall, and into a small office with the door barely cracked open. She pressed it shut with her shoulder and turned to face me with an expression I had never seen on a physician before. It wasn't clinical. It was frightened. "Sir," she said, her voice barely above a breath, "your daughter cannot go back home tonight. I need you to trust me." She looked at the closed door, then back at me. "Your son-in-law." She stopped herself, started again. "Call the police the moment you leave this building." My hand found the wall behind me. That was the moment everything I thought I knew about my family fell apart. 6 weeks earlier, I had driven 4 hours from Raleigh to Charlotte to surprise my daughter Caitlin for her birthday. I baked her a carrot cake myself, which is something I had never done in 61 years of being alive, but her mother had passed 3 years before, and I was doing my best to keep those small traditions alive. I arrived around noon on a Saturday, rang the bell, and when the door opened, I almost didn't recognize the person standing in front of me. My daughter had always been sturdy. That was the word her track coach used when she was 16, and it stuck with me because it was exactly right. Broad-shouldered, athletic, the kind of woman who moved through the world like she owned it. She was a physical therapist. She spent her days helping patients rebuild strength after surgeries and accidents. She had never been seriously sick a day in her adult life that I could remember. But standing in that doorway, she looked hollowed out. Her cheekbones sat too high on her face because her cheeks had thinned away beneath them. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite it being warm April weather. Her hair, she'd always had thick auburn hair, the kind you noticed from across a room, looked sparse along her part. She had it pulled back tight. That told me she already knew something was wrong and was trying to hide it. "Dad, you drove all this way?" She smiled, and it was her smile, but it was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I brought cake," I said. I stepped inside and her husband Wyatt came around from the kitchen. He was 36, lean, always put together, the kind of man who ironed his casual shirts. He worked as a claims adjuster for a regional insurance firm, which I had always thought was an interesting job for someone as naturally charming as he was. Wyatt could make you feel, in a 20-minute conversation, that he genuinely cared about whatever you were dealing with. I used to think that was a quality. I understand now that it was a skill. He shook my hand. He had never called me dad in 5 years of marriage to my daughter. I had told myself that was just how some men were. Their son Noah was 6 years old, running around the living room with a foam sword. The sight of him helped me breathe. He launched himself at me with the kind of full-body tackle only little kids attempt, and I caught him and held on a beat longer than I normally would. Later, while Wyatt took Noah out to the backyard to kick around a soccer ball, I sat at the kitchen table with Caitlin while she drank tea she barely touched. "You look exhausted," I told her. I was aiming for gentle. I don't think I hit it. "It's been a tough stretch," she said. "Work's been busy, and I've been having trouble sleeping." "And the hair?" She looked down at her mug. "I've been losing some. Stress, probably. I'm going to see a doctor." "When?" "Soon." I watched her hands around the mug. They had a fine tremor to them. Not dramatic, just a slight unsteadiness, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking. But I had been looking since I walked through the door. "How long have you had the shaking?" I asked. Her eyes came up fast, startled. Then she looked past me through the kitchen window at Wyatt and Noah in the yard. "It's nothing," she said. "I've been reading about it online. Low magnesium. Wyatt found a supplement that's supposed to help. He mixes it into my smoothie every morning." She said it with quiet gratitude. Should have sounded sweet. Instead, something about it landed wrong in my chest. I drove home that evening with the carrot cake mostly untouched on the passenger seat. Over the next 3 weeks, I called every few days. Wyatt answered most of the time. "She's resting. She had a rough afternoon. She's feeling a little better. I'll have her call you back." She never called back. When she did answer, the conversations were short and careful. She sounded like she was choosing every word, which was not like Caitlin. My daughter had always been direct to the point of bluntness. It was her best quality and sometimes her most frustrating one. I called her work. Her colleague Trish, a woman who had known Caitlin for nearly a decade, answered on the second ring. She hesitated before she spoke, and that hesitation told me everything before she said a word. "She's been on medical leave," Trish said. "Almost 6 weeks. I thought you knew." I hadn't known. "She told me not to worry anyone," Trish continued. "She said Wyatt was taking good care of her." I got in my truck the next morning. Caitlin opened the door before I knocked. She must have seen me pull up. She was in sweatpants and a cardigan, and she looked worse than the last time. The trembling in her hands was visible now without searching for it. She was squinting at the April sunlight like it was too bright. "Dad." "You're not well," I said. "And you're going to let me take you to the doctor today. Not next week. Today." "Wyatt thinks it's—" "I don't care what Wyatt thinks." I hadn't planned to say it that way, but I wasn't taking it back. "Get your shoes." She hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw something I hadn't expected: relief. Dr. Holloway had been in practice for over 20 years. She had the calm, unhurried manner that puts patients at ease. She did not look calm when she finished her examination of Caitlin. She asked my daughter to wait in the exam room and brought me down the hallway. The closed door, the lowered voice, both hands on my forearm. The symptoms your daughter is presenting, the hair loss, the tremors in her extremities, the cognitive fog she's described, the gastrointestinal problems she mentioned, these don't point to stress or a vitamin deficiency. She paused. I need to run blood and urine panels, but I want to be honest with you before those results come back. I'm concerned about heavy metal exposure, specifically thallium. I had never heard the word used that way, thallium. It's a heavy metal. It was used in rat poison before being banned for residential use in the 1970s. Odorless, tasteless, nearly impossible to detect without specific testing. Small repeated doses cause exactly what your daughter is experiencing. She looked at me steadily. Someone would need to administer it consistently, over weeks or months. This doesn't happen by accident. The hallway felt very narrow. The supplements, I said. Her husband gives her supplements every morning, mixed into her smoothie. He's the only one who prepares it. Dr. Holloway nodded slowly. Don't take her back to that house tonight. The police station in Charlotte was bright and cold and smelled like burned coffee. I sat across from Detective Yates, a compact woman in her 40s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and I told her everything. The thinning hair, the tremors, 6 weeks of medical leave I hadn't been told about, the supplements Wyatt measured and mixed every morning, the way his hand came to rest on Caitlin's shoulder in a way that looked like affection and felt like a claim. Detective Yates didn't interrupt. She wrote steadily and asked 3 precise questions when I finished. Does your daughter have any significant assets, property, life insurance, and inheritance? Caitlin's grandmother had passed 14 months ago and left her a house in Asheville, appraised at just over $400,000. Wyatt had immediately suggested they put both names on the deed. That had seemed reasonable at the time. She also has a life insurance policy, I said, pulling the memory up slowly. Wyatt encouraged her to increase the coverage last year. Said it was the responsible thing to do with a young child. It's $600,000. Detective Yates set her pen down. She verified those details within the hour. The following morning, the lab results came back. Dr. Holloway called me before she called Caitlin. Thallium levels consistent with repeated ingestion over approximately 8 to 10 weeks, she said. This is a criminal matter. I've already filed the report. I was sitting in a parking lot when I took that call. The sun was coming up and the world outside my windshield looked completely ordinary. People walking in for breakfast, a delivery truck double parked, birds on a wire, and I was learning that my son-in-law had been poisoning my daughter. Detective Yates met me at the hospital that afternoon. Caitlin was connected to an IV for chelation therapy, the process of drawing heavy metals out of the bloodstream. She already looked slightly clearer-eyed than she had in weeks. She looked almost like herself. That made telling her harder, not easier. She didn't believe me at first. She went through the stages you would expect, confusion, then a short, nervous laugh, then a stillness that was harder to watch than any of it. Wyatt would never, she said. He's been so worried about me. He's been taking care of me. I watched my daughter hear herself say those words. He gives you the smoothies every morning, I said quietly. He controls everything that goes into them. He's the only one who does. She looked at me for a long time without speaking. Then Detective Yates came in and told us about Abigail. Abigail Crane had been Wyatt's girlfriend for 2 years before he met Caitlin. She was 28 years old when she died of what was recorded as acute renal failure following a brief illness. The illness had presented as tremors, confusion, hair loss, and severe fatigue. The death had been attributed to an undiagnosed kidney condition, and there had been no investigation because Wyatt had been a picture of devastation. Black at the funeral, tears at the reception, the very image of a young man gutted by loss. Abigail's life insurance policy, which Wyatt had encouraged her to take out 8 months before she died, had paid out $420,000. He used a portion of it as the down payment on the house he and Caitlin would later move into. When Detective Yates laid this out in the hospital room, I watched something happen in my daughter's face that had no name I could find. It wasn't just horror. It was the systematic dismantling of a story she had believed about her own life. The one where she had chosen well, where what she had built was real. He picked me, Caitlin said eventually. Her voice was very quiet. He wasn't in love with me. He picked me. She had the house in Asheville. She had the life insurance. She had a son whose estate would pass neatly to a grieving widower. She had a father with a healthy retirement account and no other children. From a certain angle, she had looked like an excellent investment. Detective Yates explained why they couldn't arrest Wyatt immediately. The thallium results gave them probable cause, but the prosecutors needed direct evidence of Wyatt administering the substance, not just its presence in Caitlin's system. A good defense attorney would argue environmental contamination, occupational exposure, anything that created reasonable doubt. They needed him on record. "We'd like to ask your daughter to go back to the house," Detective Yates said. The word back sat in the room like something that had fallen and shattered. "No," I said. "Dad," Caitlin's voice was steadier than I expected. "Let her finish." Detective Yates explained it carefully. Caitlin would return, tell Wyatt she had missed him and felt better, and guide him into talking about the supplements. What was in them, how he monitored her doses, how he had found the formulation. She would wear a recording device. A surveillance team would be positioned around the property. At the first sign of trouble, they moved in. Caitlin looked at me. I looked at her. In 34 years of being her father, I had watched her make decisions. Good ones, difficult ones, some I didn't agree with. I had never seen her face hold what it held in that moment. Fear and fury, and something that looked underneath both of those things like purpose. "I'll do it," she said. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair beside her hospital bed after she drifted off, and I thought about every time I had shaken Wyatt's hand. Every holiday spent in that house. Every evening he'd poured her smoothie ingredients into the blender with such easy domestic confidence, and I had thought, I remember this clearly now, I had thought, what a thoughtful husband. The morning of the operation, Caitlin asked me to stay with Noah. We had told the boy his mother was getting medical treatment and would be home soon. He accepted this the way 6-year-olds accept things that are too large for them, by moving on quickly to the next thing. He asked if we could build a fort with the couch cushions. We built the fort. I sat inside it with him for an hour while he explained, at considerable length, his theory about why certain dinosaurs were probably still alive but living underground, and I listened to every word of it. I drove Caitlin to within 2 blocks of the house that morning and pulled to the curb. She sat with her hands folded in her lap. "You don't have to do this," I said. "Abigail didn't have anyone fighting for her," she said. "She died in a hospital and her family still thinks it was her kidneys." She opened the door. "I'm coming back, Dad." I watched her walk down the sidewalk until she turned up the front path. The surveillance team had given me a radio. I sat 2 blocks away and listened. Wyatt's voice when he opened the door was warm and easy, exactly what I would have expected from him a year ago. "Hey you." I was starting to worry. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Caitlin said. "The IV fluids helped. I missed you." Over the next 40 minutes, she guided the conversation with a patience and steadiness that I still cannot fully account for. She asked about the supplement formulation. Said she worried she hadn't been consistent enough about taking it, that maybe that was why she'd gotten so run down. She asked him to walk her through it again because she wanted to understand what her body actually needed. And Wyatt, who believed he had won, who believed the woman sitting across from him was still entirely under his control, told her everything. He had researched it thoroughly. He had ordered a specific compound from a specialty supplier. He adjusted the dosage based on how she was responding. He was being careful. He was watching her closely. He wanted to make sure she got exactly what she needed. Every word on tape. "Then, you seem different today." His voice dropped half a register. "Something's different about you." "I told you, I feel better." "Your hands." A pause that lasted too long. "They're steadier than they should be, Caitlin." Another pause. "Is someone listening to this conversation right now?" Detective Yates's voice cut through the surveillance channel. "All units, prepare to move." I was out of the truck and running before I had made a conscious decision to move. I heard shouting through the radio. Caitlin's voice, Wyatt's voice, other voices announcing themselves. And then the sound that I cannot describe and do not want to. The sound no parent should ever hear from a distance with nothing to do about it. My daughter once, sharp, and then the sounds of a struggle. By the time I reached the property line, it was over. 2 officers had Wyatt face down on the kitchen floor. He had grabbed Caitlin by the arm when he understood what was happening, tried to drag her toward the pantry. They found the thallium compound back there afterward, a small glass jar tucked behind the cleaning supplies, labeled in Wyatt's handwriting. She had fought him off. She had a bruise the shape of his hand along her forearm, but she was standing, and she was breathing. And when she saw me in the doorway, she crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, and I held my daughter as tight as I have ever held anything. Wyatt was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, Caitlin's attempted murder, and Abigail Crane's homicide, which the prosecutors reopened on the new forensic evidence, as well as aggravated assault and fraud. His attorney moved to suppress the recording. The judge denied the motion in under 15 minutes. Abigail's parents flew in from Cincinnati for the first day of testimony. Her mother sat in the row directly behind us and cried quietly through most of Caitlin's statement. Afterward, in the courthouse hallway, she took both of my daughter's hands in hers and stood there for a long moment without speaking. "She had your same eyes," Abigail's mother finally said. "Abby. That same look when she had made up her mind about something." She pressed her lips together. "Thank you for not giving up." The jury was out for less than 4 hours, life without parole. I watched Wyatt's face when the verdict was read. He showed nothing at all. That somehow was the most frightening thing about him, that there was nothing there to show. Caitlin and Noah moved in with me for the first several months. My house in Raleigh is not large, but we managed. Noah claimed the guest room immediately and began covering the walls with drawings, which I told him was perfectly fine because I had been planning to repaint anyway. I was not planning to repaint. I repainted everything and told everyone it had always been the plan. Caitlin slept more in those first weeks than she had in months. The doctors said that was expected and normal while the chelation therapy finished its work and her body repaired itself. She had good days and hard days. On the hard days, she would sit on the back porch with a cup of coffee and not say much. And I would sit out there with her and not say much either, and that was sufficient. We had always communicated that way. She and I. It was not a gift I'd known to be grateful for before. 8 months after the verdict, she accepted a position at a rehabilitation clinic in Knoxville. She chose the offer that felt like the farthest thing from her old life. New city, new colleagues. A caseload that had no history attached to it. She put her grandmother's house in Asheville on the market. The proceeds became a down payment on a small craftsman bungalow in Knoxville, a neighborhood with a park 3 blocks from the front door and a good elementary school 4 blocks past that. I helped her move. It took a full weekend and 2 trips in my truck and a rented trailer, and at the end of the second day we sat on the floor of her new living room eating pizza out of the box because all the plates were still packed in the boxes stacked around us. Noah fell asleep sitting upright with a piece of crust in his hand. Caitlin leaned her head back against the wall and laughed. A real one, unguarded, the kind I had not heard from her in over a year. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." She looked around the room, at the boxes, at the bare walls, at her son. "This is mine," she said. "All of it. Nobody gets to take it from me." "No," I said, "they don't." She glanced at me sideways. "You're going to drive up here every other weekend, aren't you?" "I'm retired," I said. "I've got nothing but time." She shook her head, still smiling. I thought about all the Saturdays I had driven her to soccer practice when she was 12. All the evenings at the kitchen table doing homework, me pretending to understand the math. All the ordinary hours of raising a child that feel like nothing when they're happening, and like everything when you look back at them from a distance. I thought about a hallway in a medical building and a doctor gripping my arm and telling me to run. I had not run, I had gone back in, so had she. You raise your kids for decades and you hope, in the quiet way parents hope for things they don't say out loud, that you have given them something that holds. Something that doesn't break when the real weight comes down on it. You spend 34 years trying to build that in a person, and then one morning you find out whether you did. My daughter walked back into that house. That was my answer.